Welcome to Emerging Minds in Dog Psychology. This is a series about transformation, not of dogs, but of the people who work with them. Every voice in this series was chosen through a simple question posed to professionals across the field. Who needs to be recognized for the work they've done? Who has shaped how you see this field? Whose voice has helped you when you needed it the most? Whose legacy do you admire, not for what they've built, but for how they've evolved? And with each name that emerged, it was clear they weren't always the loudest, but they were the ones that mattered to our field. So here's the gift to your ears and your heart. As they speak from their sofas, their offices, their porches, and their studios. Their dogs touched lightly, given a pat, as they recall these memories. To be clear, these aren't interviews about methods or credentials. This isn't about bragging or selling anything. They're reflections about their own internal shifts that changed everything. Stories they want to leave behind with you. Some are lessons learned the hard way. Some are lessons capturing our generation. Truths we're only now finding words for. These are the voices that don't just teach, they reveal. And in their truth, you may find permission for your own. This is Emerging Minds in Dog Psychology. We meet Diane Garrod in her home in Langley, Washington, a quiet space filled with soft light and a calm presence of her dog, Valor. You'll hear him throughout, a steady, gentle sound in the background. We invite her to look back at a time before methods, before frameworks, before the field itself had a language for what she was doing. Before you had a method, before you had a field, before anyone called it behavior work, there was still a sense of what was right. Can you tell us about that early map? How did it shape the way you understood power, animals, and your own place in the world?
I didn't really have many people to look up to or to admire. And my father was the first one who I saw working with dogs. And, that made a big impact on me that I didn't know at the time what direction that would lead me. So, my first dog was Lady, and I was in fourth grade at that time period. And my dad was, he was into Schutzhound, and he did a little bit of canine military, and he didn't have a structure that was a positive one. And so that kind of, visual was what I grew up with. And I remember one day, Lady was called by him to come to him, and she didn't. She avoided it. And then she started slinking over on her belly. Why she avoided it was because my dad would hit her if she didn't come when called. And why would you want to come when called when someone is going to give you a hard time about that? And so she glanced over at me. I was standing in a parking lot and in the gravel, and I looked at her eyes, and all I could hear was, "Help me." And so I started running over there, and I said, "Stop. And if you ever hurt that dog again, I am going to take her, and we're both going to disappear forever, and you'll never find us." And so I thought, well, that I would, be chastised for saying that, but I didn't care at that point. And he said, instead, he said, "Well, then you train this dog to come when called." And so I took over the training in fourth grade. And this dog became reactive to men. And so that's a very compelling thing to understand, that what the dog experiences stays with them. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned there was, that she was going to forever be reactive to men. And so I trained her. And the worst that it got was in my fourth grade brain, if she did something wrong that I thought was wrong, then she would just sit in the corner and think about it for a minute. As so adolescent, but that was what I was doing. But boy, that dog became my uh, soul. And we didn't have any collars or leashes that we needed to use in the little town that I lived in, and she would go everywhere, and I mean everywhere, with me. And she uh, kind of protected me.
That line you drew for Lady, it created a different world between you two. But you were still living in your father's world. After that moment, how did you navigate between those two realities? How did you start to see in his interaction with dogs that you hadn't noticed before?
He didn't know any better. I mean, I really believe that my dad loved dogs, and he had a kennel later on in his later years that he trained, and he boarded dogs, and but it was all the same way that he was taught, that he still believed that dogs needed to be obedient and do what you ask when you ask it. Well, my father was German, and kids are to be seen and not heard. When I was going through this and was a child and had a father and a mother who were shaping me, I was, wanting to have better interactions with my parents, which I wasn't getting. So I would make up fake parents and pretend that I was someone else, and so I wasn't listened to. Or you do what your parents say, and you do it immediately. I was punished. If you put your elbows on the table, you don't get dinner, and you go off to your room. And my father became a pretty bad alcoholic at the end of his life. You were always walking on eggs when he would enter the room, so I would disappear. And you don't question it, and you don't have an opinion about anything. And that is how I was raised. And then that would reflect on how I would deal with animals. I think animals were unassuming, and they were very much a part of who I was. They would listen to me. And I very early thought, how could you hurt such a beautiful animal and not have a relationship with them? So I was really even reaching out for a relationship. And I think that was very important because of the way that I was raised. Having that relationship with another being was very important to me. Very soon, through my dog and through other dogs that I would have, that if they're not treated properly, they just disappear. They just go, and they try to hide or stay away from you or try to appease you. And so I think a lot of that was what I did as well as a young child. I had a lot of emotion about animals, not just dogs, but lots of animals. Uh, and I always treated them like they should be treated.
You're known for structure, for clarity, for results. But before all that, before any of it, there was likely a moment when you had no answer. When your body knew before your brain did, this moment is different. This moment was asking for something you didn't have yet. Tell me about that time when there were no mentors, no roadmaps, just you trying to make sense of it.
There were no like positive mentors. It was a constant struggle, balancing, trying to figure out where I fit in, and growing into um, a truly positive uh, atmosphere with another being was very important to me. Yeah, Mrs. Penny, nobody will recognize her today, was a big mentor to me during that time, but was she positive? No. She was what you might call balanced today. Sometimes good, but if the dog didn't do what you said, then was much stricter in how she would work with that particular dog. And so with I was 18 with school, which I would take schools around the area that I lived in, and she would attend some of my classes and instruct me. Well, what are you going to do with that Saint Bernard over there who's acting up? And my response is, well, I had to think about that for a minute because I really didn't want to do anything about it at that point because I knew that um, they were for a reason, although I couldn't put a name to it or I didn't have the background that I have today to really call it out. So I said, well, we're just jerk the dog back into place. That's what she wanted to hear, and that's what I said. So I think a lot of times when you're dealing with mentors, are you really doing what you want to do, or are you just saying what they want to hear? And I think at that point I was, because I felt a different way.
Not every change is dramatic. Sometimes it creeps in quietly. But eventually something shifts so deeply that you can't go back. Not because someone taught you differently, but because something inside you wouldn't let you do it the old way anymore. When you think back to that moment, what was it that made you stop and listen differently?
I wasn't getting that fulfillment, and that there was a constant struggle. I guess the best way to describe it is in this conflict. I had a little parrot, and I would train this parrot, and all positive, because I'd like you to train a parrot negatively. They're not going to respond to you. And so I would teach him to balance on a balance beam and pick up dumbbells and put things in containers, and mind you, he could fly away from me, but he preferred to stay and do things for me. And I realized that you don't need to jerk and put shock collars and pain and give dogs pain to get the results that you wanted. So I trained bunnies and all kinds of other animals, and that's the way that I trained my lady and other dogs that I had after that. And in class, I wanted nothing more to do than to really get that message out to the people handling their dogs.
Diane, you've led us to that tension between forcing a dog and partnering with one, between control and welcome. Many still find themselves standing in that exact same space today. Can you tell us more about that time and what lessons we might carry forward from it?
How these things affected me and made me feel was conflicted because of not having a solid mentor like you can have today, which young people are really, I think they're just blessed to have all of the positives that they have available to them today. I didn't have that. And so that was where the conflict ensued. And I believe that communicating is really important when you're working with people and with animals. You need to know how to do that. And that's where, the conflict comes in. The conflict is where, why can't I get through to this animal? Why can't I get through to this client? And then you become irritated with yourself or frustrated, and that just means you have to think harder. And so I've learned to think harder and think around all of the edges that you could maybe see yourself using a different method other than force free, but you know that force free is better, and that's how you develop the techniques and the systems. You need to keep learning. I'm nobody. I'm just learning what I love to do and continuing to learn every aspect I can possibly gain from the inside out of a dog. And there are new things that come up, and there are terminology that changes the way you look at things. And so you need to constantly keep up with those aspects of looking at the dog in a different way. And that's why certifications and degrees are important in working with animals, period. Trust your instincts, and don't listen to those who are not offering what you truly feel in your heart. You have to have heart. You have to have that passion that brings you to the emotion of looking at not just an animal, but maybe your fellow human beings as different. So, big deal. I have all these certifications and, accreditations and all of that. If I don't work it and I don't bring it to the table, it's meaningless. So you're bringing all of this knowledge that you are getting to accomplish the goals that you see that you need to achieve with any given person or any given animal. Where I'm in conflict sometimes is when a client may have a hard time, and I've had hard times myself, and so I understand where they're going with all of this, that to understand that the person handling the dog on a daily basis is really important to understand what they're going through, whether it's with their dog or with themselves. And so you struggle with that. You struggle with a person who just wants to make their dog do something and fix it and have it go away, and you know that it will happen but may not happen overnight. And is that person capable of handling that? So the emotion of working with a dog is always something that you're dealing with. And for me, I think having lost my husband recently, I hadn't been putting the time into my own dogs that they needed, because I was in grief, and I believe that they weren't getting. So I may have slipped back into some of the other understandings, like telling them, if I'm having a bad day, please get out of my way for a while. So you kind of slip back into those things that are more demanding on the dog than what I would say would be positive. But then you recover very quickly, and you say, no, 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 that's not right. That's not how this dog sees it. This dog is really empathizing with you and wants to be with you and be with you in your grief and sit with you in your grief. And so as far as continued learning, you're more of a teacher than a trainer, and you're teaching both the animal and the person to do better in their lives. And sometimes that's not easy.
As Diane speaks of this grief, of a dog sitting with you in it, Valor is there, the quiet companion in the room. For her, in this moment, the theory is lived experience. The animal empathizing is the one pacing softly nearby.
As you would discover if you were going through health issues yourself or intense grief, as I did. I think in the process of going through hard times yourself and losing a spark. So I had lost the spark that I carried recently, over the past year. And just the going through that process and trying to get back into that learning experience. I think when you're helping other people, you're also helping yourself. And it kind of reflects back to when, how I was raised. And so my father is, not always kind to me. He tried to be, but I was more to be seen and not heard. I think that reflects even back now in the process of working with dogs and working through with myself, because you're always growing. We're not perfect beings. We can be faulty at times. And so I have a complete education of what it's like to know what that pain is like for an animal. And to know that you will one day progress to the point where you will never have to use force or any type of pain on an animal to teach them what they need to know. What that little girl didn't know was that she could work maybe better through the conflict that she went through, because she's listening to those people, which when we're young, we do that. We listen to those who are trying to instruct us, but those people also might not have the knowledge to move us in the right direction. And we're just people, right? We're just beings on this earth. And I would tell that little girl, keep going, keep believing in what you believe in, and that you'll one day have it all become very, very clear, and you will not be listening to anybody but yourself. We need to keep learning, and you can't sit there and say, well, this is the way that I did it then, and then I'm do it now, it works. Well, no, it probably doesn't, and you're pretty close-minded if you're thinking that way. And so you have to open up your heart and give it to the world. And make sure that everything that you do is what you say that you are working toward and doing.
A brief, sorrowful postscript to our conversation. Not long after this recording, Diane's dog Valor, whose presence you heard throughout, passed away quite tragically. It is a loss that echoes the very heart of her message. That our time with these animals is a profound, fragile gift, and that their companionship defines our journey through all life's joys and heartbreaks. Diane Garrod's path wasn't carved from certainty, but from a series of quiet rebellions, a promise made to a dog in the 4th grade, a refusal to accept that force was the only language. Her legacy is built on that most fragile yet durable of materials, a feeling inside that something was wrong, patiently forged over the decades into a method of welcome. So we leave you with this, a question born from her journey. What is the first line you ever drew? Not in sand, but in your own conscious. And when was the first time you said, not for me and not for them? I'm Sparky Smith. You've been listening to Emerging Minds in Dog Psychology. Subscribe to be notified when new episodes arrive. More nominated guests sharing their stories of transformation and becoming. This series is hosted and produced by Sparky Smith.